Sega.
Greetings lords and ladies, and welcome to another episode of the War Council. Today we're having a close look at ranged infantry. As much as your cavalry charges and melee battles might decide the battle for you, ranged infantry gives you the ability to take out enemy threats, thin out the enemy front line before a charge, or support your soldiers in melee combat with precise shots at the enemy. Ranged units are best positioned in the third and second row of your army, so they can keep firing while your melee troops cross swords with the enemy. You select individual targets for each of them, and the more ranged units you have, the more you will have to micromanage them. All your ranged infantry units share the same cooldown timer for selecting a target, so you won't be able to fire with all of them at once straight away. This isn't necessarily a downside though, because they all have different restrictions on their range. If you need a unit to stop firing, for example to avoid friendly fire, you can press the stop fire button. This is also on a global cooldown timer shared between all ranged units. Both actions are signaled acoustically with a signaling horn, just like when you charge into the enemy. Ranged infantry units have ranged unit skills to buff them, but you can also make use of one of the three orders focusing on ranged combat. Take aim increases your damage, scout makes an enemy more vulnerable to your ranged attacks, and swarm can incapacitate enemy units not in melee, so most likely they're archers, javelin throwers, and the like. You start the game with 2 hunter units in your army. Like levies, they are part of your militia and stationed in the castle. The rest of your ranged infantry is stationed in archery ranges, which unlock at Lord level 3. Hunters are your weakest ranged unit, but unlike units from the archery range, they start the game with a full squad of 24 men. They are lightly armoured and equipped with a dagger and longbow, making them weak in melee but giving them great reach in ranged combat. Like all bow units, hunters can have Feather Brotherhood as their unit skill, which returns men to their unit and other archer units in the army. Their second choice is Flurry. When activated, it gives them a second volley of arrows, which means they can do more damage in a shorter amount of time. On tier 2 it gives them a third volley of arrows, and on tier 3 the fire timer will also get refreshed. Longbow archers are the big brothers of hunters. They have the same equipment, but they have generally better stats. However, they are still vulnerable to ranged attacks and in melee combat. Like hunters and composite bow archers, you can choose Feather Brotherhood as their unit skill. Alternatively, you can choose Precision. It allows the archers to ignore the shields of their targets and to fire into melee combat without causing friendly fire. Since the longbow is armor piercing, this gives you a great opportunity to attack heavily armored frontline threats, and by doing so, support your melee units. Since Precision has a much longer duration than Flurry, and the longbow has the furthest reach of the ranged weapons, longbow archers are slightly more prone to be taken out of combat with the order Swarm. Javelin throwers carry spears into battle, have a slightly better melee attack than longbow archers and hunters, and are much better equipped to deal with cavalry. The real threat they bring to the battlefield, however, are their javelins, especially to heavily armored opponents. They are not a good option against units with shields, however, and they have a limited reach compared to bows. If you choose Spear Wall as their unit skill, you can protect javelin throwers from charge and melee attacks, making them a versatile option against cavalry heavy armies. If you like to keep them at a safe distance, Wild Shot might be more your cup of tea. It completely removes the range restrictions for a duration of time, and this makes them a very powerful choice for range support and a prime target for the Order Swarm. Keep that in mind, especially when facing other players in duels. Crossbowmen are a highly valuable and specialized unit, with the best range attack and best armor piercing, as well as good melee stats and equipment. For a ranged unit, they are very resilient in battle. However, their range is very restricted. They can only shoot in a straight line, either forward or to the sides. They can shoot through friendly units in front of them without causing friendly fire, but only as long as those are not in combat. You can choose Critical Strike as their unit skill if you want to embrace their hybrid nature. This allows them to ignore their opponent's armor in melee combat. And since crossbowmen carry small shields into battle, you could make them impervious to melee and ranged attacks with the Order Shield Wall. If you prefer to use them for their ranged capabilities, you might want to pick Precision instead. This will allow them to shoot into combat without endangering their allies whilst ignoring shields. Combined with a high armor piercing, this can make them a very dangerous threat indeed. Because of their limited reach, crossbowmen and javelin throwers make great candidates for the order take aim, which allows them to avoid friendly fire and boost their ranged attack. Composite bow archers complete your arsenal of ranged infantry units. While they have a slightly shorter range than hunters and longbow archers and no armor piercing, they shoot at a higher frequency and have overall superior stats. Feather Brotherhood is one option for their unit skill. The other option is Flurry, because it essentially gives you extra attacks. Flurry gels very well with the Order Scout, which makes the targeted unit more vulnerable to ranged attacks. Composite bow archers work very well with the Order Scout in general because they generally fire at a faster rate and have an already high ranged attack. And that's it for this episode. Join us soon for more battle tips and check out the other War Council videos and King's Council series for more battle and realm tutorials. And don't forget to follow our social media channels for more news, tips and tricks and giveaways. Until next time, keep it regal.